I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. The USMNT lost 2-1 to Mexico in the final of the Gold Cup. On today's show, we'll recap the overall performance of the U.S. in the competition and look ahead to their September friendlies, which will be the next time the team takes the field. To help me do all of that, I've invited Larry Henry Jr. to join the show. Larry is the managing editor for SBI Soccer and live reporter at The Athletic. So, Larry, it's been, 4 days now since we saw this final, since we saw the U.S. lose to Mexico. So it almost feels a little bit like old news. But you and I haven't had a chance to catch up on it, so I did want to get your overall thoughts. I mean, if you had to grade the team's performance over the Gold Cup, big picture, A, B, C, D, or F, what grade would you give them?
Yeah, it's definitely tough breaking it down, right? Because we saw them win, I believe, was it five in a row, going into six in a row, going into the final against Mexico. So I know that they had lost the final, and ultimately, I think that's what a lot of people will judge you on. Will you win the final or not? Overall, I still think with the amount of players that were missing from the roster this summer, I still think they did an okay job in terms of just getting the results, getting to the final, going against some other, veteran teams like a Costa Rica or maybe even, some other teams that were throughout the tournament, Guatemala. I gave them a B. I wouldn't give them an A just because, I mean, they didn't win the Gold Cup, and some of the performances, it seemed like they were able to get the job done. They kind of breezed by Trinidad, were able to get past Haiti. Saudi Arabia took them a little bit to finally get that winning goal. So that was a bit frustrating that they weren't able to, maybe score a few more in that match. The Costa Rica match, I thought they kind of got away with one there because they tie it up 2-2. Costa Rica does, and then even hit the post before it goes to a shootout. So pretty fortunate that they were able to get out of that one with the shootout win. And then Guatemala, I just thought they were better overall. And although Guatemala made it a game at the end, it was a little bit too late for them. So I give them a B overall. I think there were still some good things that happened throughout the window, but I obviously wouldn't give them an A just because they weren't able to get past the toughest competitor, and that was Mexico.
So you mentioned some good things came out of the window. What do you think is the best thing that came out of the window for you?
I think getting a lot of these guys more exposure into the program is important. I know ultimately people will say that you're judged on the results and that's it. There's a lot of guys that we're missing. We've talked about it in the past, with Christian Pulisic not being there, Weston McKennie not being there, Tim Weah, Serginho Dest, Anthony Robinson, so many first team starters not part of this competitive tournament. So it forced a lot of players to step up, and I think some players did. Chris Richards, I thought, was the performer of the tournament in terms of the national team, and I think he really just solidified his spot in the 2026. I ultimately thought he was going to be part of that roster anyway, but I thought he did extremely well. He came up with two really good goals, was really solid defensively. I think he's going to be the center back number one for years to come. And then getting other guys exposed. I know Malik Tillman, it wasn't his first camp at all, but I thought this was finally, we got to see him break through with some goals and some assists, some good performances. I think that's important for him as he now prepares for what is a reported move to Bayer Leverkusen. And then I think Diego Luna, continuing to show what he can do on the national team scale was important as well. And now he's starting to get some European interest. And I thought some other young players did well. I thought Sebastian Berhalter had a good window. I thought Alex Freeman had a good window. Matt Freese showed some positive moments at times. So I think there were some positives to take there, but ultimately I think obviously taking this roster and comparing it to what it's going to look like summer 2026, I think it's going to look a lot different because you're going to have so many other guys that weren't here back in the mix.
Yeah, I agree with you on those positives. Chris Richards especially. I mean, he's a guy that most people would say is the most talented center back. We were just kind of waiting for him to just really show it, to really just go out there and show that level. And at this Gold Cup, it seemed to me he put it into a whole other gear, and like became a leader of this team, became a dominant force out there. So you loved seeing that. I have in my notes written down a B minus, so I'm not too far off from you. On one hand, they didn't really do anything to exceed my expectations in terms of results. If you would have told me ahead of the tournament that they would make the final and lose, I would have been like, oh, cool. So they beat Canada in the semifinals. That's a huge win. That means something. But, Canada ends up getting upset. We played Guatemala in the semifinals instead. And so they didn't go out and beat a team that I thought was going to be difficult for them. You know what I mean? No discredit to some of these teams. Like, I know Costa Rica's a solid team. I know a lot of these CONCACAF teams always give us problems. But it's like all the teams they beat, you kind of felt like they should have beat. And then when they got to the team that you thought was going to be difficult, Mexico, they couldn't get it done. So they didn't do much to exceed my expectations, but I enjoyed watching the team. I enjoyed watching these a lot of the players that you talked about, Tillman, Luna, Richards having a good game. I enjoyed seeing Berhalter out there showing what he could do. All these guys, Alex Freeman, even Max Arfston, you wanted to see what they could do on a bigger stage. And I enjoyed it. It was entertaining to me. I was cheering for those guys. And so the fact that left a positive impression on me takes it up from maybe a C, which I would have just called average, to the B minus, because I did really enjoy watching this team and found myself like cheering for them. And then, the other point I'll make is that, a lot of people talk about, this isn't we call it the first team, or the A team. But, when you look at results, this team in the Gold Cup did better than that first team in the last two competitions that they've been in. You look at the Nations League Final Four where they finished fourth. That was our team of stars. You look at the Copa America where they didn't even get out of the group stage. This team of the B team, C team, whatever you called it, they outperformed those two teams against like very similar competition. Because even in the Copa America, it was the Panama loss that really kicked us out. So yeah, I give him a B minus, and yeah, I was a little bummed after the match, but it wasn't too long after the match I started thinking about September. Oh man, I started thinking about how interesting things are going to be in September. So before we go into that, there's only five international FIFA international match windows between now and the World Cup. We have September 1st through 9th, which we already know who the U.S. is going to play. Two friendlies, one against South Korea on September 6th, one against Japan on September 9th. Then we have another two friendlies in October, two more in November, two more in March, and then two more the first week in June, which is really just some tune-up friendlies that will roll right into the World Cup. So I'm looking at it really as 4 international match windows before, Poch selects his final roster, because when those June friendlies, he'll already, have the team. And the September window is going to be so interesting to me because there's been two teams forming. There's this team he took to the Gold Cup, which is like MLS heavy, kind of some outsiders. And then there's this A team or first team or golden generation team, whatever you want to call it, of all the stars, Pulisic, Anthony Robinson, Wes McKennie, Tim Weah, that weren't there. And I'm so fascinated to see how he combines those two, how he integrates one into the other, like what he does, if he sticks with one over the other. What do you think he's going to do in these for the roster in these September friendlies?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because, like you said, with it being the September window, that's a month into, or almost a month into the European season for a lot of these guys. I know like the lower leagues in England get started the first weekend in August, whereas the Premier League starts like mid-August, and then you start trickling in, La Liga and Serie A and Liga. and the Bundesliga. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think he's going to do. I think he's probably going to try to go with the first team guys and then sprinkle in some other players as well. It also gets interesting because while the European season is starting in August for most of these guys, the MLS season is pretty much gearing up to go into almost into the playoffs at that point. So you have guys that are in, fresh kind of in the early stages of their season compared to guys that are in the tail end of their season. So, and obviously too, you have to see what happens with injuries, who's going to be available. Obviously, a lot of things can happen. Hopefully, knock on wood, everyone is fit and ready to go. But I think you're going to see him kind of get those guys in, obviously, that weren't there, the Pulisics, the McKinneys, the way is hopefully we get some of the guys that maybe were given a rest as well, like who knows, with Josh Sargent and some others that were maybe rested. I know like Ricardo Pepi just returned to training, which is great news, and some other guys as well. So yeah, I think he's going to definitely go heavy on the first team guys, the guys, that starting 11 or that second starting 11 that you could see for the World Cup, but also sprinkle some guys in there. But it's intriguing to see because I think both of those opponents, South Korea and Japan, obviously we know South Korea, Sung Young-min, the Tottenham star, leads them, and then Japan is just, I think, a well-drilled machine all around. We saw them before the 2022 World Cup and lost that friendly. I believe it was in Germany. So I think that'll be another good opponent. So these are two really good opponents, and obviously I hope that U.S. Soccer finds a way to get some more top-notch opponents scheduled in those other windows, like you said, because it's one thing to play those teams, play the teams like you played in the June window, Switzerland and Turkey, in comparison to, I think, who, they were playing before, Uzbekistan and Iran and some others as well.
That's a good point you make about, the European season is still going to be pretty new, by the time we get to these September friendlies, and especially by the time they have to announce the roster, for the September friendlies. I mean, if this first match is September 6th, I would imagine in late August, maybe that last week of August, he's going to have to announce the roster. So some leagues are only going to be a few weeks in. And so some of these players who haven't been getting called in, like the Gio Reynas of the world, for example, because they haven't been getting that many club minutes, I don't think they're going to have much of an opportunity to go make an impact at their club, in those few weeks to the point where they'll get themselves called in. Those types of guys I think are going to have to wait a little bit, for October. But I'm fascinated by this, and maybe this is in my head of these two teams that I see kind of forming, and I feel like Poch has really fallen in love with this team at the Gold Cup, and he's formed a bond with those players, and I think it goes all the way back to January camp. I still think with the roster, though, you've got to figure he's going to bring in 26 players. So even if he brings in 12, 13 people from the Gold Cup and he brings in all, 9 or 10 players that we thought were missing from the Gold Cup, that still only gets you to 22, 23. So I think there's room for all of those guys. But then it might be kind of interesting where the guys like Alex Zendejas, Aiden Morris, even the Tanner Tessmans of the world, Buzios of the world, those types of guys that aren't like the elite starters, but they also weren't called into the Gold Cup. Does he bring those back in, or does he bring in some of these more fringe players, from the Gold Cup? So I don't think it's going to be too shocking when the roster comes out, but it's the starting 11. That's when I think he might shock some people. I mean, do you think he's just going to roll out this starting 11 that we're used to seeing with Pulisic, Anthony Robinson, McKennie, Musa, all those guys? Or do you think there's a chance that he is so happy with this Gold Cup roster that he wants to reward some of those players by getting a start and leaving some of the players who weren't there, especially the ones who chose not to be there, on the bench?
No, I definitely could see that for sure. Because, like you said, I mean, you could see Christian Pulisic brought in for the camp, and maybe he only starts one of the two, or Weston McKennie starts one of the two, or Yunus Musa starts one of the two. So, yeah, it's really gonna. It's such a tough decision, right? Because, like you said, there some of these guys are only going to be a few weeks into their club season. Some guys might only be like a week or two, or not even. We also don't know what the status is for a lot of these guys, like you said, that maybe could still be on the move at club level, where Gio Reyna is going to end up, where a Matt Turner could end up, there's so many guys, Patrick Agyemang, with his reported move to Derby County. I mean, England, I think, is a little bit more tougher, right, with the schedule in terms of like if you're playing in the lower leagues of England, the Championship League One, I mean, you're playing. I think it's 46 matches plus the League Cup plus, I think plus all these other competitions. I think it was like looking into it, like the first 2 weeks of August, some of these lower leagues of England teams are going to be playing 3 matches in 2 weeks, while some of these guys like Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie aren't even on the field yet. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I hope he gives a couple of these guys an opportunity, like an Alex Freeman, like a Diego Luna, like I think Malik Tillman would be there anyway, but hopefully he gets an opportunity again. Really like what he did. Maybe Agyemang, pending how the strikers look in terms of their fitness and where they're at. Yeah, so I think he's going to definitely give some of the opportunities to the guys who were there in the summer. And like you said, it's guys that, wanted to be there, whereas, players maybe like a Christian Pulisic and some others wanted to rest and recover after what was a grueling club season.
Yeah, there's a couple of Poch's recent press conferences that he said some things that I think are really telling for how the September window is going to shake out. And I think Paul Tenorio at The Athletic did a really good job of highlighting these in an article he posted a couple of days ago. But one was the press conference when Poch released the roster for June. And he's getting all these questions about the people that aren't going to be there. And he said something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, he was like, my first message to the guys on this June roster, my first message to them is going to be that, hey, look, you're not here to like just be a backup. Like if you play well, you can keep your place. I want you to know that if you play well, you will keep your place, and so it's, if they would have won the Gold Cup, I really think, as I was watching this final, I was like, if they win, I really think he's going to roll out the exact same starting 11, because he kind of showed you through the knockout rounds he stuck with the same lineup. And I think he just has this mentality now of like, the team I put out there, if they win, and they're going to keep playing. The fact that they didn't win might open the door, a little bit more. The other press conference tidbit I thought was really interesting was his post-match conference after the final, when Henry Bushnell from Yahoo Sports was asking him how he's going to reintegrate some of the players. And first, I think he gave some long-winded answer that maybe had nothing to do with it. Bushnell doubled down and said, hey, I just want to go back to how are you going to reintegrate these players? And Poch kind of looked at him and he goes, what players are you talking about? When Bushnell was, he said all the first team, and he was like, what players? And I don't think he was playing dumb. You could say he was playing dumb or like kind of being like a little bit of a smart ass, but I think he really was like, what players are you talking about? And Henry was like, Christian and McKennie and Way and all these guys. And then Poch made a comment of like, oh, you just made the list. You're going to make the list, or you're going to let AI make the list. I mean, he seemed a little flabbergasted that folks would just assume that, okay, this Gold Cup squad, see you later, I'm bringing the real guys in. I mean, I just don't think he thinks like that, And so I think he's going to give a lot of these guys a chance to keep their spot and make some of these other players like earn it, which I think they will. But I mean, it just won't surprise me at all if the starting 11 he rolls out there in the first, South Korea is the first friendly, right? It is very similar to the roster that went out there for the Gold Cup final, minus, 2, 3, 4 players, something like that.
I think too, like that as a player, like a fringe player or a young player, I think that just does you a world of confidence too, because you have this coach in Pochettino who's coached at some big clubs, some big areas, some big countries, and now he's here. He's coaching the national team, and I remember early in the year I had an interview with Quinn Sullivan, who was part of the Gold Cup later part of the Gold Cup squad, and asking him the excitement of having a guy like Pochettino in there, and who's worked with so many people, Mbappe and Gareth Bale, and so many international talents, and I remember Sullivan saying, from the messages that he would get from Pochettino or even the assistants is, if you play well and you are healthy and you're playing well and you're playing at a high level, whether that's in Europe or in MLS, you're going to be noticed. So I think that just does like I said, a world of confidence for these players, even in MLS, because it seems like there always seems to be like that perception of that these players need to go to Europe and they need to go over there and they're playing for these big clubs. And maybe that kind of backfired a little bit when they lose these matches to Turkey and Switzerland. And it's like, okay, we have these guys playing at these huge clubs and in the Champions League and big competitions. And then when put it together against a better team than us, a Switzerland or even a Turkey, and the result doesn't go your way, it just shows you just playing overseas isn't enough. You still have to, have that chemistry and have that talent and togetherness. So, yeah, I'm like I said, I'm really eager to see what happens. Obviously, like I said, hopefully everyone's healthy. I think that'll make the decisions for Poch even more tougher, is having all the guys available. But yeah, I'm really curious to see how it goes, and yeah, I know Pochettino's probably got a lot on his mind right now in terms of what's to come and in these September matches.
Yeah, I would love to be a fly on the wall listening to those conversations. I mean, I'll tell you the other thing that comes to mind is these players that he's giving a chance. They'd do anything for him. They'd kill for him. I mean, Ajimon, Max Arfston, Jack McGlynn, Diego Luna, even Tillman to a degree. The previous coaching staff didn't give these guys much of a chance, would never have given some of these guys a chance. He's given them a chance, and I see these guys like just working their tail off for him because he's made them believe they actually have a chance. So I think that's cool. So I guess where I want to go now is I want to actually look at this Gold Cup roster and try to pick out who are the guys that we think are going to make the cut. And I'm going to share something. We're going to go a little ad hoc here. I didn't really tell you I was going to do this, but I'm going to share a screen with you, Larry. There we go. And it's a list of all the guys that were on the Gold Cup roster. Okay. And I've kind of made some different highlights here. All the guys in green were the starting 11 that started every match of the knockout rounds. Then we have some guys in yellow, Jack McGlynn, John Tolkien, Damian Downs, Brendan Aronson, that seem to be the subs, to me at least subjectively, that got the most time. Like he did call on them more than once to go into a game, and get some decent minutes. And then all the guys in the red here, Matt Turner, Walker Zimmerman, Mark McKenzie, Miles Robinson, Chris Brady, Nathan Harriel, Quinn Sullivan, Paxton Aronson, Brian White. They're the guys that either didn't play at all or barely got a sniff. Maybe they got into one match. And then there's a few guys at the bottom, Johnny Cardoso, Haji Wright, that it was hard to tell how much Poch trusted them because they were injured. Haji actually had to leave camp. And so, I don't know, we didn't really get a feel for what Poch would have done with them, if they were healthy. And what I want to try to do here is kind of put a line in the sand, of like I want to focus on the players in the green and the yellow, first of all, because some of these guys that didn't play at all, like Matt Turner, I mean, he's going to be on the roster. But of the guys that played, I want to try and draw kind of a line in the sand of where you think, above this line, these guys are going to get called into the September roster. I'm drawing my line right here underneath Jack McGlynn. And I struggle with this one because McGlynn was a guy that seemed to be one of Poch's guys. Well, first, let me start with this. I think all the 11 that he started are going to make the roster. I mean, I think he wants to reward them for what he feels is a good performance in the Gold Cup. I think all 11 of these guys, just because he trusted them for those knockout rounds and they made it to a final, he's going to bring them. He's going to bring them all in. So for me, it's the guys in yellow here: Jack McGlynn, John Tolkien, Damian Downs, Brendan Aronson. Where do I draw that line of like the players that I think will definitely be there? And I drew it at McGlynn because I still think, even though McGlynn was starting early and then he wasn't starting, he still did bring him into the games. He's had some good moments. He's seemed like Poch really values him, and so I think he's going to make the cut. Would you draw the line somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I'm in my head, I'm looking at it and I'm picking guys that are both in the yellow and the green, maybe not all of the green. I
So
think that
who would you leave off then from the green people?
out of the green people, the players that I would leave off would be, I think, Luca De La Torre, Sebastian Berhalter, Max Arfsten, and Matt Freese. I think
Wow, you didn't think
it's
Matt Freese makes the roster?
it's tough because it's hard because I don't know what Pochettino is really thinking. If he wants to give Matt Freese another opportunity to start in the September window, then like I can see it, but then I'm also thinking like I think Matt Turner maybe gets that job back and gets his opportunity again. Maybe Freese is there as a backup, but not particularly as a starter. I definitely think that out of the green list there, I think Chris Richards is definitely going to be a starter. I think Tim Ream's definitely going to be a starter as well. Tyler Adams, I mean, we know what he brings to the table being the captain. I think he'll definitely be there. Malik Tillman, I think he'll certainly be there as well. Diego Luna. And I think as much as I think people might be upset that Ajiman would be there, I think out of the forwards in terms of who might be healthy, who might have minutes under their belt, I think he's definitely going to be higher up on the list than some others just because he's been playing with Charlotte FC for most of the season and he's played the summer with the Gold Cup. Whereas some of these other guys, a Ricardo Pepi, a Falarin Balogun, a Josh Sargent, will just be entering into their club seasons. And then who even knows with Haji Wright in terms of his just injury status. I know he's with Coventry City in their preseason, but he hasn't trained with the team. So I think there's still kind of a unknown about that. I think Jack McGlynn's definitely a guy that could be in the mix as well. Like you said, it seems like Poch values him and knows his abilities with that left foot. I think John Tolkien maybe sits this one out. And then looking at the other two, I think Damian Downs just earned that transfer to Southampton. He's going to be, I think, a big part of that squad. So I think he might be out in this one. That doesn't rule him out for the later fall windows. And same thing with Brendan Aronson is he does bring experience to the mix. He has a boatload of caps with the national team. But again, whether or not he remains to be part of that Leeds United squad in the Premier League kind of remains to be seen. So I think once we get the season up and running in Europe, it's going to be maybe a little bit easier to pick who would be there and who wouldn't. But yeah, those are my picks. I forget how many the number off the top of my head, but I would say maybe 6 of those guys in the green make it, 7 at the most, and then maybe a Jack McGlynn out of that yellow list.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll talk about Brendan Aronson first. I mean, he's a guy that I think really his stock went down in this Gold Cup. I mean, you would have thought going into the Gold Cup, looking at this roster, that he would have been a starter. The fact that he couldn't even win a starting place, in this group and didn't get that many minutes otherwise, I think is very telling of what, Poch thinks of him. Of all the guys in green, which is it's the starting 11, that played in the final against Mexico and the other knockout games. The one that you've left out that surprises me the most is Matt Freese. So I'm not saying I think he's won the job or that he's even going to start. But to me, He's at least moved into, I would say, third on the depth chart behind a Matt Turner and Zach Steffen. But the more and more opportunities that Zach Steffen misses, I mean, the less his chances are going to get. And I'm not saying I think Freese is going to beat out Patrick Schulte necessarily, but it's just like when you have a guy that you know what he can do. You haven't seen Schulte play in a big match for you, but now you've seen Freese go through a whole tournament and play in a big final like the Gold Cup final against Mexico. You know what he can do, and I just feel like he's going to trust him more, you know? And then it's not so far-fetched that I think he could start in the first September friendly because, like we talked about, I mean, Matt Turner, I don't know when Ligue 1 starts, but even if Matt Turner wins the job at Lyon, he's only going to have a couple games under his belt by the time they have this September window. I mean, will he have had a chance to, I don't know, get back in form and look sharp? Who knows? But those are the guys I think, of all those ones that you mentioned, I'd be surprised if Matt Freese actually gets left off, but we'll see. What about the guys, in red? So these are the guys that hardly played at all. I look at this list and I think Matt Turner will be there. Between Walker Zimmerman, Mark McKenzie, Miles Robinson, I would guess at least one of those makes it. I mean, you look at the other center backs that weren't called in, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Austin Trusty, so maybe one of those guys gets the chance, but there's just not enough center backs to go around to leave off all three of those guys. But then I don't think anybody else in red here gets in. What do you think?
No, I think I'm with you there. I think Matt Turner will be there just because being a veteran goalie and obviously being the number one before, I think that definitely gets him in the mix. Out of the center backs, I think out of those three, I would think that Miles Robinson probably has the best chance of playing out of those three. I know Walker Zimmerman was obviously a big part of the national team during, stints of Greg Berhalter's era, but center backs have now kind of risen past him in terms of his stock. I know Mark McKenzie had a really good first season with Toulouse, but it seems like he doesn't really translate that kind of playing style or confidence over to the national team. I think Miles Robinson would be the one to play out of those three. I don't see Chris Brady being in the mix, at least when all the goalies are around and healthy. I would probably think Nate Harriel, Quinn Sullivan, Paxton Aronson, and Brian White all drop out as well. I thought Sullivan showed some good moments in that one start that he had. Paxton Aronson really didn't get a lot of time. Neither really did Nate Harriel and Brian White as well. And I think, so I think those four would probably drop out as well. And then even just touching on the two, the Johnny Cardoso and Haji Wright. Haji Wright, we don't know just in terms of his Achilles injury and how long he's going to be out. And then Johnny Cardoso, I imagine, I would like to see him back in the team. I think he can offer a lot, but, being out injured, and then obviously now with the reported move to Atletico Madrid, maybe he needs that to get finalized before, we start seeing him with the national team again. And I imagine that'll get finalized before the season starts. But
yeah, I mean, if he went to place in the starting 11 for Atletico Madrid, or he's, getting a lot of minutes, it's hard to think of leaving a guy like that off. But he's just been so disappointing in a U.S. men's national team, jersey. I wonder how many more chances, he's going to get. And then Haji Wright's interesting. He's a player that I think is really kind of on the bubble now because he's gotten plenty of opportunities with Poch. I haven't seen him do anything really impressive, yet. So it wouldn't surprise me if Poch at least looks and to someone else to maybe at least give him a shot, in this next camp. But we'll see. All right, Larry. Well, let's call it a show right there. I will make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at lhenry019, and also to your work at SBI Soccer. Thanks again for joining the show today.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.